So this is our first panel for our Black in Cardio Week. My name is Debora Kamin-Mukaz. I'm a postdoc at the University of Vermont, and I will be one of your moderators. And I'll let the other moderators introduce themselves. So we'll start with Makeda. Makeda, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. Good?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Makeda. I'm a PhD student at Johns Hopkins University, and I work with vascular tissue engineering in particular.
Adama.
Hi, my name is Adama. I'm a master's student studying medical ultrasound, specifically echocardiography, and I'm at the end of it now. Thank you.
Thank you. And I wanted to introduce our guests or our speakers, but I'll let them introduce themselves because they can say more about themselves than I can. So I'll start with Dr. Alison Brown. So can you introduce yourself?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alison Brown. I'm a program director at NIH's National Heart and Lung and Blood Institute, where my portfolio includes nutrition and health disparities research, but to prevent cardiovascular disease. My previous research experience is in community-based participatory research in communities of color to address heart disease, and then also looking at epidemiology data to examine the differences in diet quality, as well as hypertension risk among Blacks in the US, particularly those Blacks born in the US versus those born outside of the US. So happy to participate in the inaugural panel for Black in Cardio Week, and look forward to your questions.
Definitely, thank you so much. And Dr. Sam Boateng.
Hi, I'm Sam Boateng. I studied mostly in the UK, did my undergraduate and PhD in the UK. And then I was in the States actually for about 9 years. So I did a postdoc in the States. And then I was also a research assistant professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago. So after about 9 years, I decided to come back to the UK. So I'm currently a lecturer at the University of Reading, which is just west of London. My area of research is understanding heart failure and looking at the molecular mechanisms, the molecular and biochemical mechanisms of heart failure. And I'm pleased to say that I have two of my PhD students are actually African origin, both Nigerian origin. We've been having lots and lots of discussions at our university about race and ethnicity and how that impacts on outcomes, both at the undergraduate level and also at the postgraduate level as well and beyond. So I'm looking forward to the discussion this afternoon.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Dr. Sherry Ann Brown.
Thank you for being with us, everyone, this morning. I'm currently Director of Cardio-Oncology and Assistant Professor at Medical College of Wisconsin, and I maintain a formal appointment as a research collaborator at Mayo Clinic, where I was for 7 years in the clinician and investigator program. And I'm excited to be with all of you this morning, and I look forward to all of us sharing together.
And Dr. Stephanie Lindsay.
Good morning. So I'm Stephanie Lindsay, and I'm currently a postdoc at Stanford University in the Pediatric Cardiology Department, and also have an appointment with the Institute for Computational Engineering and Mathematical Engineering. And all my degrees are in biomedical engineering, and I study congenital heart defects, how they form, and different kinds of technologies that we can use to treat them.
Definitely. And then Miss Juliet Bademosi.
Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Juliet Bademosi, and I am a cardiac physiologist currently working in the UK. I have my first degree in physiology from the University of Nigeria, University of Lagos, Nigeria, apologies. And then I have a master's in public health and another one in clinical physiology, specializing in cardiology. I'm very clinical, not really research oriented. I've only done a few research studies. An interesting one was the WASTE study. I don't know if you've heard about the World Alliance Society of Echocardiogram study we did recently, where we compared normal chamber quantification and normal parameters across different ethnic groups. So we were the ones who obtained the normal data from Africa, and the major site was Nigeria, first cardiology consultant in Nigeria. Thank you. Really excited to hear from everyone today.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for your introductions. So we will start with our questioning because we're a little bit late. So the first question that I wanted to ask you was, what was a monumental point in your career that led you to the role that you are currently in? Because usually we have that point in our lives when we actually decide that this is where I want to be, and this is what I want to do. So can you tell me a little bit about it? And
I can start us off. I would say that for me, there are multiple points that came together to lead to where I am now. And if I think about a couple of them specific to the clinical fields that I've chosen, that I do research in, I would think about the fact that when I was doing the MD PhD, I shadowed a general cardiologist, and I noticed that most of his patients were elderly and already in heart failure or atrial fibrillation. And I thought, what happened to the younger folks in their 40s, 50s, or sooner before they develop heart disease? What can we do so that we can curb the burden of heart disease in the country and in the world? And so I decided that I wanted prevention to be the foundation of my career in terms of patient care and research. And then when I was a fourth-year medical student in my last year of the MD PhD program, I saw an email about a pilot study in cardio-oncology, and that was the first time I'd heard that term. And many people today aren't familiar with the term yet. So that was great for me to learn about that as a medical student, realizing that I always wanted to have an impact on individuals with a current or prior history of cancer as well. And so I realized that I could help treat, manage, and prevent heart issues in individuals who have cancer. And so that's why I'm currently a director of cardio-oncology, and a huge part of my practice and research focuses on prevention. And so there's so many things that make a difference, whether it's things people have said to us or things we've experienced or things that we've noticed. And for me, those are two of the points that really led to what I'm doing now.
definitely. And Dr. Brown?
Yes, happy to go next. Similar to Sherry Ann, it's several points I think were those pivot points for me in my career, but one of which was the summer after undergrad. So I was a chemistry major at Spelman in Atlanta. And the summer after undergrad, I did an NIH-sponsored internship in the Gambia, where I looked at malnutrition in the Gambia and kind of juxtaposing that with the overnutrition and combined with malnutrition here in the States and overweight and obesity. It just led me to really go more into the nutrition space and how nutrition and also physical activity can play a role into prevention, particularly cardiovascular disease and other diet-related diseases. So that was kind of a pivot point for me, because previously I was interested in bariatric medicine, particularly because a lot of family members suffered from obesity, but then also cardiovascular disease as well. But that has kind of, nutrition has kind of been an underlying theme that I didn't necessarily think of. So then that led me to kind of do more research in terms of what the nutrition field could do for me. And then thereafter, I went for my master's in exercise physiology and nutrition at Columbia in New York. And in the year after that, I worked for a nutrition advocacy organization in DC called the Center for Science in the Public Interest. And they're like considered the food police of the nation, if you will, and do advocacy around improvements in nutrition facts labeling, school foods, salt in foods, and so forth, really putting a microscope to our food industry. And that year, it was a great experience because I worked directly with kind of a medium to large size nonprofit organization doing, nationwide advocacy, but it was really kind of a dead end in terms of no opportunity for growth in the organization. And that I remember reading papers released by the CDC looking at how the large rates and prevalence rates of obesity among African American women in particular in the US and wanting to kind of delve more into that research. How is it determined and so forth. And that led me to go for my PhD at Tufts in Boston. It was kind of serendipitous because my PI and mentor did work around cardiovascular disease prevention among African-American women. So that kind of led me to my path today.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Dr. Lindsay?
Yes, so I guess for me, I wanted to be a MD physician basically from the time I could walk, and I would always play doctor. And when I was in undergrad is when I first discovered what biomedical engineering was. And so it was a whole field geared towards making new interventions, trying to improve medicine. And so whether that be devices or surgeries. And I was so excited to join the field of biomedical engineering. And then I began doing research for my biomechanics professor as a sophomore. And that's when I started moving more towards getting a PhD than an MD. And so doing undergraduate research was very eye-opening for me, and it kind of shaped my whole view of research. So my undergraduate mentor, Dr. Larry Tabor, he brings static mechanics to the embryo. So basically development, he was coming from a purely mechanical engineering or aeronautical engineering background and applying all that to the embryo. And that's very much what I do now and what I'll continue doing going forward. And for me, it's all about how the heart forms and how we can prevent defects from forming if possible. And so undergraduate research was very much a very big moment for me.
Definitely. Any Dr. Boateng and Ms. Bademosi, any other comments to what our other speakers have said?
Okay, for me, sorry, Dr. Boateng.
Go on, you go.
Okay. Very similar to Dr. Lindsay. Growing up, I always wanted to be a doctor, so that was my initial passion. Somehow I ended up in BSc physiology. I didn't like it at all, and I wanted to escape from physiology the moment I graduated, but that's why I went for public health. Cardiology for me is very personal because I started taking my dad's blood pressure since I was 8, using the manual SPIG, because he's been hypertensive for a very long time. So I've always been in love with cardiology. But because we didn't have a lot of information about cardiac physiology or what to do with physiology back home in Nigeria, everyone else just moved away from physiology. So, went to banking, went to anything else apart from physiology. So after that, there was an event with my dad where he slumped, and I started having one-on-one conversations with his cardiologists and specialists. And then one of them told me, "Have you heard of cardiac physiology?" And I went and researched about it, and that was how I applied for my second master's and delved into the field of cardiac physiology. Yeah.
Definitely, thank you. And then last but not least, Dr. Boateng.
Yes, I think, very similar. I think the experiences that you have when you're young as an undergraduate, can have a big influence of whether you decide to follow that. And when I was an undergraduate, I had an opportunity to do a placement at a university in a lab that was looking at heart failure, and particularly trying to understand the molecular mechanisms associated with dilated cardiomyopathy. And I had a good time doing that placement, and they said to me, "Well, you're interested in doing a PhD." So after I graduated, I went back and did my PhD there. And then afterwards went to the States because I knew that I wanted to have a research career. But in the United Kingdom, it's quite competitive, and it was always said that you needed to have some experience in the States in order to increase your chances. So that's one of the reasons why I went to the States and spent about 9 years there. And so after that period of time, I was fortunate. I had a number of offers either to stay in the States or to come back to the UK. And because my family was here, my parents were here, after I got married in the States, we came to the UK. And since then, I've sort of had a permanent position and have been able to both teach and do research. And so for me, it's always been a kind of real joy, a passion to be able to research in the cardiovascular area, kind of real passion.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. So my second question, we talked about your young selves. So what advice would you give a younger scientist or younger scientists starting out? What advice? Something that you want them to know, something that you wished somebody had told you before you started your career that would have been very helpful.
I think one thing that we always love knowing or hearing is that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I remember once when I said that to my dad when I was finally finishing training after high school, the bachelor's, master's, MD, PhD, residency, fellowship. At some point in that range, I told him I thought I was finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And he said, "Are you sure it's not another train coming?" I'm glad that it was actually the end of the tunnel. Although it doesn't mean that wherever we are, we've in any way arrived at what we're finished doing in our lives. It really means that we're on to the next stage of the way that we contribute and have an impact. And so I think always seeing folks ahead of us and also always being reminded that things will get better if they're not, or things will come together if they're not. As we sort through that cloud of research, for example, eventually we'll come up with something that can make an impact. And so I think recognizing that is always helpful. When I was in high school, that was the first time I thought about wanting to help to curb the international toll of heart disease. And so it was always encouraging to me when folks were supportive and helped me think about the steps I would need to take. I had no idea about the details or length of the training that I would be embarking on for the next couple decades of my life, but I wouldn't have done it any differently.
Definitely, definitely. Anybody else? Dr.
I'm
Brown?
happy to share. I would say at certain points of your career to really be open to new experiences and being the yes person in whatever environment that you're in order to really take advantage of the experience. And you never know who you're going to meet. I would say I've had a non-traditional path because while I was going for my PhD program, I didn't have funding. Just a little tidbit, I don't come from a family that has been in academia. I didn't really know the difference between an assistant professor, associate professor, or anything like that. And my mentor at the time, she was an assistant professor, and I didn't know what that meant in terms of her consistency in funding and so forth. So that contributed to challenges around funding later on in my program. But it was really a blessing in disguise because it allowed me to work at the Boston Public Health Commission and get more public health experience. I worked in the community and worked at all women's and children's gym in a predominantly community of color in Boston. So it really opened up doors for me down the line. And even though in that moment, it felt very stressful because I had to have multiple jobs, but it really was a blessing in disguise. So that would be one point of advice. And another point of advice would be in that moment of saying yes and being open to different experiences, make sure you take out time for yourself and your self-care practices, because it's great, right? To be this pioneer in your field, you do this work, you work, endless hours, but at the end of the day, if us as those in the cardiovascular research field pass away prematurely because we're not looking after our own health, what does that say? So just being mindful of what the foods that we put in our body, the physical activity that we engage in so that we can be our full and complete selves to engage in the work and the passion that we want to pursue in our lives.
Okay.
Yeah, I think following on from what Alison has said, I think we need to be real as well with those that we're mentoring and so that they're aware of how difficult it is, particularly when it comes to balancing your personal life with trying to get that work-life balance. And it is really hard and it's really stressful. So, I think what my advice to every individual will be to say, look, think about what is it that you really want, and realize that it's going to be hard. and decide whether you still want to do this. Because the only thing that will drive you through, working at 3 o'clock in the morning to get that grant completed, or to finish that paper, in between the time when the children are up screaming in the night, and you think, why am I doing this? And it's only the passion is going to carry you through that. So you've got to be really passionate, I think, about what it is that you want to do. And then if you're passionate about it, that will drive you and keep you going, even when times are really difficult, when your grants get rejected, when your paper gets rejected and you think, why am I doing this? I think passion should drive you.
Definitely. Any other comments from our other guests?
I just want to echo the passion. Yeah, my biggest advice would be to ask questions, ask lots of questions, and to follow your curiosities, because that's the only thing that gets you through the journey, is following your passion, and really not being afraid to not follow the path that everyone else is following, or do it exactly the same way that everyone else is doing. It doesn't matter, like, as long as you're doing like what you'd like to do and you're thinking of a plan for yourself, you're gonna advance and you're gonna make it happen. That's what keeps it fun, is just being passionate all the time.
Definitely. Ms. Bademosi, any advice when it comes to the professional world?
Well, like I think Dr. Bademosi said, passion. There are some days I ask myself, why in the world am I doing this? Some days I just want to like change occupation. I told my husband, I think I'm tired. I just want to change jobs, because for us, it's very physically demanding as well. So we have a lot of postural problems. And some days like today, when you have, you find the tumor, you find the VSD, you find every single abnormality you can possibly get in one single day. Some days are like that, and you question why you're doing what you're doing. It comes down to passion, it comes down to purpose, why you're doing what you're doing. So stay true to yourself and keep being passionate about it, and I think you keep pushing you. Yeah. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you so much. This is Black in Cardio Week, so we are definitely focusing on Black people in these different fields, and also Black students and everybody in between. I think one of the issues that we all struggle with, especially when you come into a space that was never designed for you, is imposter syndrome. It's a big thing right now. I think now with us being able to talk about mental health and some of the issues that come with being in these academic spaces, we are having conversations around imposter syndrome. So my question for you would be to know, how do you handle imposter syndrome? How do you deal with it?
I think for me, I fall back on remembering all of that training that I described earlier. I remember when I started intern year after medical school, all of us were starting first year of residency. And during orientation, we were told that many of us might have spent months in our fourth year of medical school on a beach somewhere, probably don't remember any medicine, but that's okay, because everyone will help us to get back up to speed with what we need to do. And then we're also told that many of you feel like you slipped into the cracks, and you're hoping that one day we don't all find out that you made it in, and we don't know how that happened. But recognize that we handpicked every single one of you, and you're all meant to be here. And so remembering things like that, I find, can be helpful, because we are where we are because of a fit between where we've decided to be and who we are. And so with all of the positions we're in, with all of the degrees we have, with all of the opportunities that come to us, it always is helpful to know that it's a combination of working to get there and also taking advantage of opportunities and having mentors that guide us along the way. And so even if we might be doing the PhD work and feel like, oh, we're so much better at this than being a doctor, or if we're doing the medical work, we feel we're so much better at this than being a doctor, or we realize that we're really gifted in both, we have to remember that for me, it's a calling. I agree with the passion, agree with the purpose. And for me also, I honestly feel called to be both a physician and a scientist. And so I think drawing upon all of that, and as you've said, remembering why we're doing what we're doing, helps us to remember that we are meant to be here. And so even if, for example, I know one other person in the country who was a director of cardio oncology who's African-American, even if I was the only Black person in my physics classes, I probably didn't tell everyone, but my bachelor's and master's are both in physics with a concentration in biomedical science and biotechnology, bioinformatics. And my PhD was in biomedical science and computational biology in particular. And so for me, a lot of what I've done, I've been the first Black person, or I've been the only Black person in the room, but recognizing that what I bring to the table is amazingly valuable helps me to recognize that I'm not an imposter, that if anyone in the room belongs there, I am one of those people that belong there.
Definitely. Definitely. Any other answers to this
to,
question?
Add to that is you're not born with the knowledge that you have. And part of what we do is being lifelong students. And so we're always learning, and there's always more things that you can learn. And so I think part of dealing with imposter syndrome is kind of distinguishing between real and self-perceived barriers, because there definitely are real barriers, but then there are also self-perceived barriers. And what you can do is you can take care of the self-perceived barriers. And for those, if there's something that you feel like you would like to be better at, then seek out mentors in those areas and work and better yourself in those areas so that you feel that you're the best that you can be in that area. And then you're confident in your own knowledge. And so you don't have to do anything alone. There's always a huge network of people. And so finding people and just making sure that you feel good about something for self-perceived barriers.
Yeah, to add to that, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say that also having a good mentor is very helpful, because someone that you can bounce ideas off if you go through a bad patch or bad situation, that you can just contact and just say, look, what do you think about this? Someone who will encourage you, someone who's going to be really positive and say, look, I really believe in you. I believe that, you can do this, because there are going to be those times where you do feel that you don't really belong there. And I think by having someone who can just have a kind of different perspective when you're in that kind of low point, to be able to say, look, keep going, you can do this. And I think all of us, if we're honest, can look back and think about, those people that encouraged us and those people that supported us, that helped us to get where we are. And it's difficult enough, to do what we're doing because of, the color of our skin. So I think the fact that we've made it this far should be an indication that, we belong here.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that, I was thinking the same thing, Sam, about the importance of mentorship, and you're in the room for a good reason. And to Sherry Ann's point about your calling, and really sharing that voice and perspective, whether that be your personal experience or something that you gained in the knowledge that you gained in your training. I think another thing that has been important for me, particularly during the PhD program, is I became friends with non-Black colleagues and built authentic relationships with those colleagues. And that led me to believe, like, I know more than they do, in terms of, the knowledge that I bring to the table. And that just helped build my reassurance in what I bring to the table and the knowledge that I have gained in years of training. So just remembering that. But, building authentic relationships takes time. And that definitely was the case when I was in Boston, because I was the only African-American US born in my particular cohort. But, it's a 6-year plus process. So I was able to kind of get out of my shell and build authentic relationships with my colleagues, which I think helped to quell some of those insecurities that I had.
Absolutely. Any other comments?
It's just going to be a little bit of what everyone has said. One thing I can't remember who said it, was self-perceived limitations. I think that was one thing I dealt with personally, where I felt because I was coming from a different country, I was automatically at a disadvantage. So what helped me was take a step back and look at the bigger picture and identify that actually I actually was coming from a country where I had very little knowledge or skill base, and that helped me to realize that I actually did have a little knowledge gap, and I worked twice as hard as my colleagues. I logged twice as much hours in the lab my counterparts did, and that actually helped me build my confidence. And once my confidence was built up, I think that just sorted out for me the situation.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing these So we've talked a lot about mentorship and how mentorship is very important if you want to succeed in, if you want to be a scientist, a physician, or if you want to have a successful professional life. So how do you choose a good mentor? Because again, we are dealing with a population that is, we're dealing with Black students. And like you said, there are a lot of real barriers that are there. So in everything that you do, in everything that you're trying to achieve in order to have a successful career, you have to be a little bit more careful. So how do you get to choose a good mentor? How did you guys get your own mentors, and how were they helpful to your own careers?
For me, I tended to reach out to folks that demonstrated some interest in me, asking about what my interests were, my goals are, what I was working on. But that wasn't always the case. So for example, for the research mentors, they were chosen based on what I wanted to do. And so given that I went into college with everybody knowing that I was pre-med and I was going to be a physics major, I was initially given a biology advisor, and our first meeting was, I'm switching to physics because that's what I'm going to major in. And so then I got a physics advisor and then did some physics research. It wasn't really what excited me. And then we decided I would work with a physics professor who also was doing research in collaboration with a lab at Harvard. So then my bachelor's and master's research in precision medicine, before it had that name, in genomics and transcriptomics, was with a physics professor that was working with data and samples and in a lab at Harvard. And so then I ended up working in that lab too in the summers, and my research was based on those for the bachelor's and master's theses. And so I chose my research mentor that way. And he was Caucasian and was a really, really great mentor. I learned a lot from him. We had a really great relationship. And then did the bachelor's and master's together. Then for the MD PhD, I similarly chose the research mentor based on what I wanted to study and the tools I wanted to gain in computation of personalized genomics, looking at how to study that. And he was also Caucasian. And then when I decided I wanted my career to focus on prevention, I learned that we had recently hired a cardiologist whose focus was on preventive cardiology, and she happened to be African-American. And so then she also became a mentor. Then when I did the clinician investigator program with the postdoctoral fellowship at Mayo Clinic, that research mentor was chosen because it was the only person doing precision medicine for prevention of heart disease. And my cardio-oncology mentor also, my cardio-oncology mentor is Caucasian. The research mentor for the postdoc was of Indian ethnicity or descent. And so all of those were chosen based on what I wanted to do. But in addition to that, we all have different kinds of mentors. And so I've also selected mentors based on folks who seem to understand where I'm coming from or where I want to go, people who seem really vested in my growth and my career and how they can have an impact in that way. And sometimes we also chose mentors based on people who are not only where we want to be, but who might look like us. And so I think it's important to recognize that when we're choosing mentors, it's not just one person, but different folks, whether it's for career, research, and so on, or just life. And many of those things can play into that decision.
Yeah, I think that was an excellent explanation. Similarly, I've had mentors that were very focused, given my research, and the dissertation committee, obviously, those mentors who really helped me with that project and research was very helpful. I think during the initial phases of my PhD program, I felt very isolated in the experience. So I reached out to people of color in the Boston area just to get used to the environment and that I was unused to. And then another thing, I tapped into the alumni network of my graduate program to have, having that commonality of both going to the school where I was, particularly focused on kind of minority graduates of the program, and really, was frank with my mentor and my advisor around that. Then also gained mentorship outside of the academic space as well, just to, in terms of bouncing ideas off of one another around career choices. And then there's also this idea of peer mentorship as well. And I have a friend of mine who were in the PhD program together. He's now teaching at Rutgers, but I definitely classify our relationship as a peer mentorship where, we motivated each other. He, I think, finished his comps ahead of me, but we were studying together. We motivated each other. And to this day, we're a source of motivation for each other. We do different types of research, but it's definitely more of a peer mentorship type of arrangement. And then again, I have mentors that I still keep in contact with from today, from my time at Spelman. And I actually am writing a recommendation for her for the American Chemistry Society. So again, it's kind of a bi-directional relationship at this point, given where I am in my career and where she obviously is in hers. So it's been a great experience to have different types of mentorship relationships, but then also noting that now is the time to give back and have mentees as well to really feed into other people as others have fed into us. So I can't say enough about the importance of mentorship.
And definitely, I think I want to, and since we're live streaming on all these social media networks, just reiterating the need to reach out, because this is a good opportunity. Black in Cardio Week is a good opportunity to reach out to these mentors, because as you can see and as you've heard, they are very important to develop your careers. So Dr. Boateng, you wanted to say something? I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
I mean, what's been said already has been excellent, really, and I don't have a great deal to add to that. I think, just it's important to have a mentor. So I think, you don't try and sort of go through it on your own, but as I said, try and, as has been said already, try and find a mentor if you don't have one. The thing about science and research is that most people are quite selfish and self-absorbed and focused, and so they tend not to be in a position to have the time even to mentor. But you will find that there are people that are interested in you and are willing to support you and have an interest. So look out for those people and make sure that you get as much as you can. But as has also been said, do your bit and help others, so that the help and the support and the lessons that you've learned, make sure that you pass them on to others as well, so that you can support the next generation that are going to come in after us.
Definitely.
And I guess just to add to that is just, so your mentor, your research mentor definitely should be someone whose skills that you would like to have for your career. But maybe that's not the best mentor for you all around. And so I think the important thing is to know what a mentor should be. And what a mentor should be is someone who provides resources and support for you to succeed. And so if your mentor is not able to meet those things, and if they're not opening doors for you and providing you with the resources to advance, then that's when you make sure that you have other mentors and outside people. And just because you move on from one institution definitely doesn't mean that you left those people behind. And so my mentors from every step of my journey are all still really important to me, and I've gone back to them at various times for different advice. And so to remember that, and also just with the comment of research mentors tend to be very busy. And so also if you can help optimize your time with them, maybe make out an agenda for your meeting if you only get to talk to them every couple of weeks, and just helping them help you kind of thing as well.
Definitely. Okay. It's been a great conversation. We have 15 minutes, so I'll try to squeeze in 3 questions. I think we'll pivot to funding because I guess for a lot of people, funding is very important. So we have 2 questions about funding, one from our chat and another one that we prepared. So we will reach out to Dr. Alison Brown because she is doing a lot of amazing work at the NIH. So we've heard or we've seen a lot of papers coming out about issues related to social disparities in NIH funding. So our question will be to know, what is the NIH doing about it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, it's important to speak with your program officers before you submit your application. And then also note that like where I sit, so there's intramural program within the NIH, but then there's an extramural program. So I sit in the intramural program side of things where I guide grantees through the application process. And then there's a review section process, which is completely separate from where I sit. So one, I think critical piece of advice, depending on where you are in your career, if you get the invitation to serve on a review panel, to do so, because, we need to diversify that end of the kind of grant review process in order to, meet the needs of minority health. But we do have an institute solely focused on health disparities research. That isn't as highly funded of an institute. So where I said I'm at NHLBI, but the National Cancer Institute, NIDDK, the National Institute on Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Disorders, and then NHLBI, those are the top 3 highest funded institutes within the NIH. So as much as possible, and obviously given the nature of this panel and the focus, cardiovascular disease, it is great that NHLBI is one of the top funded research areas. But I would say, again, try, if possible, serve on study sections if provided the invitation, and our SROs are those who are responsible for finding candidates for the review process. They know that this is an issue and wanting to increase the diversity within those study sections. But at the end of the day, it is a pool issue, and the candidates, if the pool is small because of the lack of diversity and underrepresented minorities in research, then that's going to trickle down into who's available to serve on review panels. But in terms of actually, getting a successful application, knowing exactly what mechanism to apply for, depending on what stage you're at in your career, it's best to really talk with the program officer to help guide you through that process.
Definitely. And speaking of somebody who's been successful getting funding, I'm going to talk to Dr. Lindsay. There is a question for you. So Adam Bush said, big congrats to Dr. Stephanie Lindsay on your recently awarded funding and faculty appointment. We see you, so they definitely see you. The question for you is, what's your biggest tip for writing a successful grant application?
Yeah, so my biggest tip really is to get critical feedback from people both within your field and outside of your field. And so writing grants is definitely a learned process. And I've written, I guess, a number of fellowships throughout my career, and now starting to write a number of grants as well. And it was my mentors who initially helped me learn how to write these things. And for the grants, if you have specific aims page, you do that early, and you make appointments with people. You ask to meet with them because a lot of times they won't read it on their own time because they're so busy. And then they'll read through the specific aims page. You can talk about things, and maybe they're an expert in one part of what you're doing, and maybe they don't understand the other parts, and they can help you clarify it and make it so it's readable for everyone. And so just definitely reaching out to people and getting feedback has been a really big part.
So I'll ask the rest of our speakers if they have any other tips, any other advice for successful application, especially for Black applicants, because as we said, one of the biggest issues is in order for you to get tenure or to stay within this field, you have to get some ground. And we already have very few Black people within this field. So if they don't have the money on top of everything else, it gets very, very complicated very fast. So do you have any other advice when it comes to getting grant money from the NIH, NSF, or I'm assuming Dr. Boateng from the UK equivalent of the NIH and the NSF? Definitely,
I mean,
if you have any tips, to share them.
I think for grant writing, make sure that you give yourself plenty of time. I mean, we've all written grants at the last minute, and that's never good. But also making sure that if there is a technique that you're not familiar with, trying to get the right collaborators, the people that have got the weight that will back up your application, so that when someone reads the application, they know it's doable because you've got the right backing behind you, especially early on. So when I was in the States, I got a scientist development grant from the American Heart Association, and this was is quite a nice grant because it pays half of your salary and allows you to become partially independent. So this sort of grant gives you the opportunities. You're not fully independent. You're partially dependent on your mentor as a postdoc, but it gives you that stepping stone to becoming independent. And so those sorts of grants are really quite good to get you going. And once you've got something like that, it gives you that sort of track record, so that when you're going for something that's independent, it gives people a little bit more confidence to say, well, look, this person's got a track record of getting funding. And then hopefully with the right collaborators, it gives you that opportunity to then step out and to be completely independent with your writing.
Definitely. Makeda, our moderator, has a question, so I'll let her speak.
Everyone, yeah, we're very grateful for just kind of all the wisdom and information that's being shared here. I think one of my questions is kind of going back to the mentorship stuff that we talked about earlier, because I hear over and over again how important your personal connections are in your success in science. And the way that we do science is generally very individual, at least in my field. It's very much like you go in the lab and you're supposed to kind of make magic and come out and write about it. And if you are in an environment, like we talked about, an environment that's not necessarily built for you, I guess my question is, how do you position yourself mentally to be able to, I think, build, like you, Dr. Brown, you talked about building authentic connections, like with your peers even. How do you position yourself to be able to build those connections when the people around you are not necessarily particularly warm? And how do you position your headspace to, I think, outside of just the, I've done well, I've been able to do X, Y, and Z, and that's why I'm here. How do you position yourself where you're not in a place of kind of feeling like you're constantly struggling against discrimination or things like that? How do you kind of position yourself in a positive space that frees you to do your work?
So I think one thing is, maybe you're not necessarily going to be able to find it where you are. So that's one thing that you kind of have to accept, but you can find it. And so, for instance, like maybe you want to go within like your entire school. Like I was at Cornell and they had a diversity programs and engineering office. And that's where I could find like more community within this office. And more support and make meetings with those people. And then also at a conference, someone comes up to you and they ask you questions afterwards, and maybe they're actually like further along in their career and you really admire them, and you email them back and you keep emailing them with questions and things, and you start forming a connection that way. And so it's not always obvious how you form your network, but it's just being like knowing that there's tons of people and just looking around you on this call. And then yeah, so looking outside of where you are sometimes is necessary.
Yeah, and to add to that, and in 2020, if the silver lining of it all is that we don't have to be restricted to being in person with one another, so if you are going to conferences, God willing, we will get to be able to go back in conferences in person. The people that you admire their work or vice versa, to connect with them afterwards and trying to simulate a relationship with them thereafter. And Stephanie made a good point about going to your office. Sorry if there's background noise. The institute where you're at, if they have any type of diversity and inclusion office or a student group that's centered on those issues. So for example, at my graduate school, they had something called the Freedmen Justice League, which is a student-run kind of organization that focused on social justice issues. So within that group in itself, found a lot of white allies that were kind of quote unquote woke and down with the cause when it comes to kind of racial and ethnic injustices. And that was kind of a safe space where I could build authentic relationships with people. And then also going outside of the norm. So I enjoy running in my free time. So I run buddies with the people in those groups. And that created this personal connection where we could talk both about personal things, but then also our work. And then in those spaces, it helped me build my confidence to know that, again, I am supposed to be here. My knowledge is just as great as theirs is, and go from there. But I think finding a point of connection and commonality would be important, whether that be cooking or, something outside of the cardiovascular research space, in order to find that point of connection, and then being seen as a human outside of the color of your skin, I think is important to build those authentic connections, and then go from there and build from there. Yeah.
We have a last question from our moderator, Adama. So I will let her speak.
Thank you, everybody. I think going off the theme of imposter syndrome and just not feeling like you belong, there's sometimes, I guess, when you might be trying, but it's not worth trying anymore. Like, how do you deal with those situations? Like deciding when it's actually time to stop and look for something else, even though it could be what you have your heart set on. So I wanted to know your experiences with that.
So just to clarify, it's not working anymore because like this is outside of your capabilities, or because the environment's not right for you?
I think, yeah, mainly the environment. So let's say you're passionate about it and you kind of want to still be in this field, but you can see that it's not working out because of the environment's not going to be one that's good for you. So letting go of a dream you had and just trying something else with a better environment, or trying to stick it out because you like it.
So I'm very against, I think part of the reason why I chose to go into academia and so I'm starting my own lab is because I don't think that you should let other people who don't look like you and don't have your experiences tell you what you can and cannot do. So that always really frustrates me, and seeing I guess the way people's mentors treat them, kind of turn them off from a field or research in general. I don't think that it's recognizing when it's not your problem and it's theirs, and how you can create your own network and you can make a better environment. You just need to get away from the one that you're in right now. So for instance, I was in a really toxic environment for a couple of years, and I constantly emailed really good mentors that I had in the past, and I made a plan of how I was going to get out of this and how I was going to keep advancing. So not letting it turn you off to, you should always pursue your dreams.
The very, very last question, which will be our last question for Dr. Boateng. How did you seek out these academic positions in the US while you were in the UK? Could you, you are muted. Dr. Boateng, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, one of the really good ways to make contact is at conferences. And obviously, as we've talked about, that's really difficult now. But all the contacts that I made was at international meetings. So, you know, people come to your poster, and if you're enthusiastic and you know, you present well, then that's a really good opportunity to have a kind of personal discussion about what you want to do. And that's how I made the contact to go to the States when I was in the UK. So I went to a conference in Kansas City, and I met lots of different people there. And so conference is a really good way of being able to make contact with others. And hopefully, as Alison said, God willing, that will be an opportunity that will return, so that we can meet people face to face. And that's one of the best ways. And it really puts you really ahead of others, because if you've made that personal contact, once you apply, they'll know, okay, right, yeah, we remember this person because we've spoken to them. And that really gives you an advantage when it comes to getting a position.
Definitely. Thank you so much for this, telling us your stories and giving this very helpful advice. We had a lot more questions that we had prepared, but the conversation went where it went because we needed to hear your opinions. And definitely stay with us for Black in Cardio Week. Interact with our participants, because I do believe that we need these strong mentorships, and we need these networks, because we have to diversify these fields. Otherwise, we will keep on dealing with issues of racial disparities in cardiovascular health. So thank you. This is the end of our panel, and let's continue with Black in Cardio Week. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
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 Bye.